All right, I'll call the meeting to order. Thank you, everyone, for coming, folks here and folks online. The first order of business is to establish a quorum, which I think we have. 1, 2, 3, 4. Earl is going to be here shortly too. He's right next door finishing another meeting, so he'll be here in a minute or two. Then approving the draft minutes of January 8th. Does anybody have any corrections?
Did you see the email this afternoon?
Saw the email come through about clarifying.
Central Maine engineers versus civil engineers. I don't know if they're civil engineers, but Earl said Central Maine engineers.
Yeah, I don't know the distinction or if it matters too much for the purposes of this. So, I mean, I think if Earl
It's just
wants
a
to,
distinction.
yeah. So I think I'd be happy to approve them as written. And if Earl wants to show up and comment on it later, we can maybe take it back up. But for now, I think it's fine to move on. So I would say all in favor of the minutes? Aye. It is unanimous. Minutes are approved. Next order of business, as an update on the status. I've had a lot of feedback personally, and I think other members of this group have had a lot of feedback. I know that the town has received lots of emails, there've been lots of calls. So folks are very engaged in this issue, which is good. I know that our representative, Mike Ray, has put in a couple of bills with the legislature. I'm still waiting on more details on that, and I was unable to find any this afternoon. But I don't think they directly relate to the housing of the boat in Lincolnville as much as other ferry-related issues, although there's some interplay between things like ferry staffing and pay and where the boat needs to be housed in terms of at least how it was explained by the commissioner. So I also think I've reread the commissioner's letter. I think, hey, you're all welcome. I think it's pretty clear that we're a couple of years away from a decision being finalized to keep the boat in, off of Islesboro. So that gives us some time to think about this. And I think it's just important to be thoughtful, deliberate, and cooperative with the other islands. So we can all pull in the same direction. To that end, the town is in the process of hiring Genevieve McDonald, who is on the call, and I don't believe the contract has been finalized yet, but Genevieve is a former representative, currently a lobbyist who is very familiar with the ferry service. And I think we'll do well to help guide us and steer the process going forward. So with that, I don't have any other updates personally. I know that others are working on various aspects of this. I know that Peter and Earl have been working on thoughts about the safety of the boat staying in Lincolnville, and others are working on other things. So I think they're going to be important in terms of formulating a strategy and argument, going forward. I don't know that we need to hash that out at this meeting, but I think those are really good pieces to know and to be pulling on so that when we're crafting our arguments and bringing this to the DOT, we're ready with all the information. So I think that's good.
One thing I'd like to add is a person I didn't know until a week ago, Bob Koshan, who lives full-time Seal Harbor. He's a marine engineer who's experienced some breakwaters when things don't work. He was a marine forensics engineer. And he's very willing to work with us in helping us draft our arguments against the ferry being on the mainland. I just spoke with him again an hour ago. And he's quite willing to work with us and help any way he can.
Great.
So we're going to meet in the next 2 weeks.
Great to see what his thoughts are about that. And so it's always good to have,
Well, he has an engineer stamp. But on anything we send, he's
a licensed individual.
licensed marine engineer.
I know him. I've talked to him.
Yeah, I never met him before.
Yep. Anybody else have any updates, further thoughts?
The only other thing, I just stepped out of a meeting with the IAP, and I did mention that it would be desirable for, in the long term, if we can have to try to entice ferry crew that would live here long term, permanent crew, that we should include that in our IAP criteria for selection process. So that's been, we're going to see if we can dovetail that as well.
Great. That's also good news. Anything else? Fred, you have?
I do have some questions.
Sure.
And you partially answered the first one. We don't know what's in the proposed bills yet. So with that being said, in your statement about, not sure if it's specific to the vote being put in Lincolnville.
So I don't believe it's specific. I think it's related to crew pay and upper
Yep.
mobility of crew.
Yep, which is part of it.
Yeah, right.
So my question is that, because I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around exactly what a lobbyist will be doing. So because we don't know of a proposed bill, we don't have any information on that. Do we need a lobbyist, or do we need to go back to my original statement at the first selectmen's meeting when we first started talking about this? About retaining a lawyer. Even though this is stretched out for a number of years. I've worked with the ferry service for 20 years now, and I'm really thinking that if there's nothing proposed. That affects us, and I don't know, and you don't know, but if there's nothing proposed, do we need to put a lawyer in place? Which we have the town attorney, but I'm not quite sure what the locks and limits of that are. So that's one of my concerns is, do we need a lobbyist? I have no problem with a lobbyist. I am all for it if we've got a proposed bill to look at. The other question is does the new presidential executive order about the electrical mandate, does that affect this ferry boat, this hybrid being built, because all that grant money is gonna go away?
So let's just take a couple of things to separate out. I think there's a misconception about the hybrid electric ferry and whether that directly relates to the boat staying in Lincolnville.
Yeah.
So those are two things that are happening at the same time, but I
Yeah.
don't think that the ferries moving to Lincolnville are related to the boat
But
being
that could
electric.
be part of your argument, is what I'm.
It could be
what I'm
part of,
saying.
yes, it could be part of your argument, yeah.
That
And
could be
we're-
part of your
so-
argument.
Right, so I don't know whether or not the directives from the new administration are going to impact funding for the ferry, or whether that's something that has already been issued and can't be undone. It's hard to know that. I mean, I don't know that at this point.
Okay,
But I do think, it's probably, at least in my view, early to hire an attorney. That seems like as things get closer and a decision is being made that is adverse to our interests, and there's a reason and a basis for us to fight that in court, then I think we'd be looking at that, which is where we ended up with the rates, a few years ago.
so when the lobbyist, when the lady speaks, she will explain to us what she would be doing in this, so that will answer most of
Yeah,
my
and-
questions right there.
Ms. McDonald is on the call right
Yeah,
now.
I
and
have
if-
one more question.
Yeah,
Then I'm quiet for the rest of the meeting.
No problem. Yeah.
All right. My personal feelings is that I don't wanna just get the vote on Islesboro. We've been dealing with this for a long time. It's a major safety issue for the crew, the patient. It's a major undertaking. Gabe, you and Pete being seafarers, you can imagine, and Earl, you all know what it takes to load these boats up. I want more, myself. I want, not only do I wanna see us retain the boat to Islesboro, I want specific language put back into the tariff that boat will be available for emergency trips. With the assistance of the United States Coast Guard doing what we're doing now, when they triage the call to make sure it's worth violating the 12-hour rule. I don't wanna just get the boat back in Islesboro. This is our only shot. It was like when we had the succession with Waldo County, that was your one shot right there to do that. This is our one shot to salvage the ferry boat and the service that we've always had. So I want to add into that program wording in the tariff that will ensure that boat will be available for emergency trips and not overused. We will not overuse it like they've accused in the past. We've done everything the state has asked us. I have proof of that. We have done everything, and we can show in our statistics that we've really worked hard to triage our calls and to utilize the Quicksilver and private boats when needed. But I'm telling you that we shouldn't just get that boat brought back to Islesboro and stay. We should be going for wording in the tariff to ensure that it's available for emergency trips, and I'm sure that the islands will feel the same way.
Right.
One comment I just want to make too about lobbyists, I wouldn't just, it wouldn't be just to monitor bills, would also be to keep our representatives, senators informed. Be the link to really keep them informed in a positive fashion of what we need. And so it's kind of a multi.
Right, but the tariff is not a bill.
No,
So
no, I
that's
see your point on the tariff.
that I want that in the tariff, and I will keep petitioning. And I will appeal to Augusta if I have to personally. I will not be the one that plays nice with the other kids, because this is serious business. I'm the one that watches our people go down over that incline with the patient when times you shouldn't be doing that. And this is our one shot. So I am requesting that the committee support that effort. And not only do we get to keep the boat, we get it put in the tariff that we're gonna be able to use it for emergency reasons.
Yeah, certainly. So let me just respond. Point well taken. So this is a very broad conversation,
Yes,
right? Where part of what I think has brought a lot of attention is the boat staying in Lincolnville and the corresponding effect on emergency response. However, this conversation, as you know, is beyond just keeping the boat in Lincolnville, and part of other possibilities that have been suggested by the ferry service are a standalone emergency response vessel. So there are other parts of this conversation that are all fitting together that need to be, but that needs to be part of
I'm
the
familiar
conversation.
with all of them.
Yes, I know you are. I'm just saying it for the minutes that this is a broader conversation than simply,
And
will the boat stay?
I agree with you on that.
We
And I also,
will be, Pete and I talked a little bit about this, but we will be talking about the negatives of emergency response separate boat. And that the ferry is the best alternative.
Right, Fred can certainly help flesh that out, because I know Fred has lots and lots of firsthand experience
Oh,
about
sure.
why.
I've written all of our policies and protocols and guidelines
So we will.
around that whole
Yeah, we
thing.
will work on that argument. We'll talk to you as we do it.
One thing I would just add to what Fred said was that at this time, the crews are not required to do emergency runs. And I think that needs to be changed. The whole system needs to be formalized. And crew need to be compensated for
That's right.
however it is. I'm not suggesting what that is, but it needs to be formalized.
And that's part of a very broad conversation that's all stemming from where we are right now.
That's all I had.
Yes, that's all. Yeah, it's a very big conversation about how to handle that.
Thank you, Gabe.
Yep. Does anybody else on the call have anything before we move on to Genevieve McDonald?
Amy has her hand raised.
Amy, please.
Hi, I am relatively new to the island. I came in 2022. I'm on the board of the Up Island Church. We held a letter writing event on Sunday. We had 17 or 18 people attend. And in listening to the conversation, it occurred to me as I'm hearing you say that this is a very complex issue. And the components of the complex issue that got raised during that meeting included things that we've already talked about, like the medical and the safety. There was a concern that only 9 or 7 to 10 per year medical evacuations or medical emergencies in the after hours does not necessarily give us a strong argument just in terms of numbers. But the other items that people talked about were the impact on the school and the ability of the school to attract students. Considerations of the grant that we have and whether we are in violation and would need to return money to the government. What the impact on our workforce is. So both on the island, people trying to be on the island and get to work, off island, as well as getting people to the island for a work day. The economic impact on the year-rounders in comparison to the summer residents. the crew considerations, which has clearly already been part of this conversation. But there was also conversation about, do we have a lens that allows us to ask the question, if we're looking at greater number of storms at sea rise levels, is Lincolnville the right place to be berthing a ferry? If we're going to move to the mainland, should we be considering another location for the ferry? Our beloved Grindle Point's going to be underwater. Is this the right time to be thinking about that? So I walked away from the meeting on Sunday with the letter writers thinking this conversation is really much bigger than the engineering considerations of keeping a ferry in Lincolnville, and the medical, which is extremely important. Everybody stood up and sort of clapped at the idea that we want to maintain safety and medical services on the island. But I will say the conversation was much, much bigger than that. The concerns of islanders in that meeting was really larger than the conversation we've been having so far. Thank you very
Thank you very much for that, Amy. And if possible, if you would share those letters with the town office so we can keep them in our file, that would be much appreciated.
So, yeah, so everybody was told to send the letters to the town office for sure. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, just when you first started, you talked about the number of trips. That's actually a strong argument for keeping the ferry here, because when we talk about the 12-hour rule and so on, the captain has the option to bypass that. And the fewer the trips they have to make, the easier it is to rationalize that under Coast Guard regulations with no problem. So the more trips would be a detriment rather than the fewer trips are a positive thing. And as far as the sea level rise and all that, and moving the ferry, there are really no good alternatives for that. That was kind of set in stone when they first put Grindle Point in place. And in Lincolnville, there's no real other options. So some of those arguments or those thoughts really need to be looked at pretty hard before they're out there and gain traction. And we are working on the idea of it not being feasible because of weather and many reasons to keep the ferry on the mainland.
All right. It looks like Sonia, you have your hand up?
Yes, I was wondering, when people looked at the educational aspect of this, did anybody consider Islesboro students getting to Mid-Coast Technical? I think if they just flip-flop the ferry schedules, start leaving the mainland at 7:30, that unless Mid-Coast is willing to change their start times, it would greatly negatively impact our ability to send kids.
Yes, indeed. I think I know that the commissioner has been made aware that the change in schedule would impact, I don't know if it was schools specifically, but the folks who are going back and forth every morning who depend on the ferry at a particular time, either to get here or to get off the island. That was something that I know was brought to the commissioner's attention about the shifting schedule impacting, but I think it's important to add that to the list of concerns. I see, it looks like Doug, you're raising your hand.
Yes, I am. I don't see a hand icon on here. I can click. I don't know what's wrong with that, but anyway, at least you saw me. With the Hillsborough Ambulance Association, I'm the president. We had a meeting yesterday. We have quarterly meetings, and we decided on a letter that we would send directly to the governor, believing we should work from the top down in this. And it's not done haphazardly. I did check with a few other people who know politics in Augusta much better than I do, and they explained how these things work, and who can actually get this done. we can deal with the commissioner and all that, which I suppose we should do, but that's very unlikely to get to the key decision maker. So we've decided, unless you tell us this is a horrible idea, to mail this letter to the governor, saying that it's important to the Islesboro Ambulance Association that the ferry be based here. That's basically it.
I was just gonna suggest, I mean, I think that I definitely appreciate, and I think communication with the governor is really important. I think what we may want to do before kind of giving official sanction on that is to jump and introduce Genevieve,
Yeah.
because one of some of us, we've danced around some of the issues and why we brought Genevieve on board, but part of it really is not just lobbying on a specific bill, but on supporting kind of a broad communication and strategy development on this issue that includes work with the legislature, but it also includes communication and kind of executive branch strategy. So I would appreciate Genevieve kind of giving us an introducing herself and her experience, which really is unique and in depth in this particular issue. And then also I think can help speak to recommending when is the right time, should individual organizations at any point be starting communication individually with the governor, sort of how do we develop that sort of package to make sure that our communication is as effective as possible.
Yeah.
That's the problem right there.
And then also, I think part of what we want to do is be working cooperatively with the other islands who I know are very concerned about this issue too. And we want to make sure that everybody's pulling in the same direction, right? We want to make sure we have a sort of a cohesive approach where the islands work together and on this issue in sort of, a cohesive way, I'll say. So with that, Ms. McDonald, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
You're a little bit garbled.
I've been having some challenges with my audio. Hold on just one moment. Let me try taking these out. I can work. That's not a very good introduction.
She may need to reboot.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
No, it's still garbled.
Give me just one moment. My apologies. I'm going to call in on my phone so that you can hear me.
Thank you. Yeah, no problem.
Let's see.
Know what the letters say before they get sent out, so there's not contradictory. I muddy the waters.
Yeah, I'm really interested in her experience and sort of how to time these things in a way that keeps it fresh on the, in people's minds and delivers the.
Right, and obviously the town doesn't control what an individual citizen does on their own. We don't have any control over that, but we can, for what we are doing, try to work, sort of as effectively.
Yeah, our official organizations, we should be on the same page.
There, my apologies. Let's see what's going on.
Welcome.
Now I have one more issue where I can hear myself echoing.
You gotta turn your speaker off.
I think I did.
Nope, you're still echoing.
Well, there, you can't see me, but you should be able to hear me. Did we get there?
Yeah, we got there. Thank you.
There. Sorry, my apologies about that. I stay at a friend's camp when I'm up here in Augusta, and the service is not spectacular. So
I'm Genevieve McDonald. I am a senior policy advisor with Pretty Strategies, which is a very polite way to say that I am a lobbyist. I live in Stonington and I served 2 terms in the Maine legislature where I represented North Haven, Vinyl Haven, Frenchboro, and Swans, which, as you know, are served by the Maine State Ferry Service, in addition to some additional island communities that are not. So I have a lot of knowledge about this issue. And I am very happy to be here, but also disappointed to be here because DOT has consistently been a challenge for a wide variety of issues for the entire time I have spent tracking this issue. So I saw the news last week or the week before and started to read letters from the unbridged islands, from a variety of islands, about your position and perspective. And you certainly do have a rallying point while there is a diversity of, different opinions about different issues on each unbridged island served by the Maine State Ferry Service. Where to berth the ferries are certainly a consistent point among all of the islands. So what does a lobbyist do? Well, one of the things that I have done, and I wanted to, I didn't want to interrupt you earlier, but I have spoken with Representative Ray and I have spoken with Senator Grahowski and gotten their feedback from the meeting among the coalition of coastal legislators that met last week. So I do know where in process the legislative proposals are. So I'm happy to go on a little bit about that if it would be helpful, about the legislative process and where the bill language lands. I don't want to,
I think that would be great.
dump you immediately.
Yeah, there are folks on the call who I know are interested in that. So if you have that information, I think that would be very helpful.
I do. So Nick Batista was very helpful in sending me some background information of conversations that he had with Representative Ray about what they were proposing. And so my understanding right now is that there are 5 to 6 bills, each sponsored by a different coastal legislator, and they have agreed to co-sponsor each other's bills. And so because this issue really seemed to come to a head right before cloture, my impression is that not all of the bill language is fully drafted. So when a bill is submitted to the revisor's office, it can say anything, it can say nothing. It can really just be blank and have a bill title as a placeholder. I don't think that these are quite that undrafted, but really just ideas on paper to get into the revisor's office before the deadline. And then there is an opportunity for each lawmaker who submitted a bill to refine that language before it is released publicly. So my understanding of the position of every one of these bills is that they still have that opportunity for revision. So hopefully we will have, I didn't want to go any further in talking to lawmakers until this meeting took place. So now that, we have, and I've gained some insight onto your positions and concerns, I will go back to Representative Geiger and Representative Ray, Representative Eaton, whomever else may have a bill, and ask what is their language, what are they proposing? And it is my understanding there is a bill specifically to require that the ferries be berthed overnight on the islands. It could be an economic impact study. There's a lot of directions that this could go at this stage, which is really the point that I'm trying to convey. So plenty of opportunity. And it is very helpful always to make sure that every rep that has an unbridged island is supportive of each other's bills, but something that I have learned by experience and some messaging that we really need to get out there to lawmakers is why somebody who is in Farmington should care, right? So just to pick a town out of the air, there are 151 members of the legislature or of the House. And so we really need to explain to people in Skowhegan or Caribou or who have a vote in other parts of the state why they should care as passionately about this issue as those of us who live on the coast. So that's an important component. Who are the influential lawmakers who may not be educated about this issue and really will need help understanding why a bridge located inland is just as important as a ferry service to an unbridged island. So my role in this process, or as I envision it, certainly with your input, is strategizing communication, the legislative process, who needs to be touched when and what that messaging needs to be so that it's the most effective and we can get the support we need in the legislature, because this is a hard issue. I mean, I had a number of bills when I was in the legislature about the ferry service, some with more success than others. And these can be some really tough conversations.
Great, thank you very much for that update. And I think, yeah, talking about strategy going forward, and perhaps this is going to touch on the next point on the agenda, thinking about who, when to contact, what the messaging is probably the next step on where we are, especially given that we're perhaps several years away from a final decision being made, but trying to make sure that we are, on top of the issue, working in whatever way we can to sort of impact the decision makers on this.
What happens if they wait their 2 or 3 years?
So does anybody have any questions, or Ms. McDonald, is there anything else you'd like to add?
I guess
No,
one.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Jenny. Just a question for you. I mean, how long, is there a deadline that the revisor's office or the legislators have to get that bill finalized, the language finalized before it, so that it can be made public? Or is that something once the cloture deadline hits, they have, kind of deep into the legislative session to get finalized?
So both and everything. The legislature is interesting in that way. So we are I'm just guessing, frankly, there's approximately 3,000 bills. And so the revisor's office is probably about a month from getting bills that were submitted close to the cloture deadline back to lawmakers to ask if they have any revisions before the bill is released to the public. And I don't know off the top of my head, but I believe that it's 3 business days to make revisions. So if some people have language that is ready to go, they only put in a placeholder and they know they want to add more language. They've had all the stakeholder conversations. If not, there's multiple opportunities for amending a bill before it goes to a public hearing. Certainly amendments can be added in the work session. Certainly amendments can be added on the floor. So there's a lot of opportunity based on conversations with the administration or DOT or emergency services to inject new information or take out information and language in the process. So I would guess bill titles haven't even been released yet. The cloture deadline was 3 weeks later than it typically is in the legislature. The new leadership decided to extend that deadline a little bit. So I would say that we are probably a month from these bills becoming public.
And I guess one additional question is, and maybe this is something you want to think about rather than comment on right now, but just if you have thoughts about timing in working the legislative process versus working kind of the executive branch communications, or should those be done concurrently, or should we really be waiting for the legislative process to understand what bills are before us so that we can start to communicate that a cohesive message together to both branches of government?
So I think that we do want to have a cohesive message. I also think that the administration, and by that I mean specifically the governor, is aware of this issue. There's certainly, she enjoys spending time on the islands and certainly has some personal connections. So I'm sure that this issue has been brought to her attention, both informally and through Commissioner Van Note. I'm sure he has made her aware. So I do think, I don't think we need to hold back from initiating conversations with her. But we don't have, at least I don't have at this point, a specific ask or solution to propose to her. So I think, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I think that somebody like emergency medical services, right? That is a very specific concern and really an overarching concern. So there may be different stakeholders' voices who we want to elevate at this point as sort of a light touch, and then certainly follow-up conversations that, 1,000 people have weighed in on their support of this issue. So it will be in stages, and we do want it to be succinct to a degree, and also cohesive. And I'm happy to discuss this more at length. I would like to be able to share with the governor specifically what bills are being put in, which is not information that I have yet. I have an idea, but I don't know specifically who is doing what yet.
Great. Hey, Doug, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. The Islesboro Ambulance Association would be one of those stakeholders that should be prioritized early in the running here. And I'm concerned, and with all due respect to the timeline that we think we have, I think there needs to be a real sense of urgency about this whole thing. I think it's dangerous to be thinking, well, we have a year, 2 or 3 to really work on this. I think we need to be working, as Fred said in one of the other meetings here, pedal to the metal on it all the time. We do want to keep the momentum we have from Islanders here with letter writing. We don't want them to throw up their hands and think that nothing's happening. So I think we should proceed with urgency as if the deadline all this was sooner rather than later.
Yeah, no, I think everybody here is certainly proceeding with urgency, and I think the distinction that needs to be made is that we're gonna have a better outcome if we are not shooting from the hip, but if we're being thoughtful about this issue and deliberate about how we move forward. And that's not to say we're not urgent. That's not to say we're not doing anything. That's just to say, I think we want to make sure we spend the time on the front end to make the right ask and to get everything as in line as possible to have the best outcome as possible. I don't think that starting off, guns blazing, let's go sue the state is going to be an effective strategy for us, for the other islands, to get where we want to be. And saying that we have 2 years is not to say that we're not urgent. It's to say that we want to be as deliberate and thoughtful as we can so that we get to the right outcome, at least in my view.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the main thing about us writing to the governor, when that letter goes out, is that she is the one who can actually stop this process in its tracks with a simple phone call. And that would be great. Now, the legislation is great too, but we don't know what that's going to be or when it's going to be.
Right, so I mean, you say stop this in its tracks, but as Genevieve noted, we don't have a specific ask to make. We don't know the bills that are in place, so the exact message to the governor is unclear about what we are trying to accomplish and where we want to go from here. And so,
Well, wouldn't the message be to call Van Note and tell him, hey, I'm in charge of you. Go ahead and put the ferries on the islands and keep them there.
So that's one message that could come from the governor to Bruce Van Note, but I'm not clear that that gets us the emergency response from the ferry service necessarily, right there. As Peter noted earlier, there is no obligation on the part of the ferry service to make emergency trips. So this is a broad conversation and a directive from the governor to keep the boats on the islands. I don't think is getting us 100% of the way there, which is, I think, why this needs to be a thoughtful and deliberate conversation about that.
Understood. Thank you.
Just another food for thought there to keep in mind, because I agree with your sense of urgency, is that the governor is not going to be the governor in 3 years. So we do want to make sure that whatever we do has lasting impact.
Yep. Any other thoughts, questions? I see a hand up, but I can't read the name. Is that Laura?
Laura stands to your Dino.
Yep.
Yeah, but it's really Michael. Hi.
My voice changed.
I just want to make sure. I'm sorry.
Hold on, Peter. We'll get you next.
Okay, thanks.
What I'm understanding is that these bills being drafted, of which there may be somewhere between 3 and 5, will be rewritten and finalized, so to speak, in terms of what's going in front of the legislature within the next month. Obviously, there are a number of items, concerns that I would think we would want to be sure are recognized and covered in the various bills. And I don't know what the mechanism is for the towns, all the island towns, to put the list of those items in front of the legislators drafting the bills with enough time for them to include those items. Is that something that we should talk about?
Yes, I think so. I mean, without knowing, I guess, until we know what the bills are, I think there's going to be ample opportunity to make amendments and to make changes. In terms of
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what Genevieve would be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks like she came off of mute, so I don't know, Genevieve, if you have sort of recommendations about, I mean, I think part of that value in having you with us is that you are in Augusta having those, conversations with lawmakers to help both understand what their thinking is and inform what's going forward. But do you want to speak a little bit to sort of how that process works between now and when things are published?
Yes, happy to. So I didn't want to, I wanted to make sure I gave you an opportunity to respond first. And I just want to be clear that I don't know that they need to be revised. We need to find out specifically what they say and then circulate that. So there may be, I think there are 5 to 6 bills. So there may be some where the sponsor feels this is the complete language and I am going to run with this. And it is based on a conversation that I had with, whomever asked me to sponsor this. And there may be some that are just placeholder bills that don't have language. So we need to find out, and I will do that tomorrow, find out specifically what has been submitted and then review that and determine if there are additional things that we feel need to be added or ideas that we are less interested in pursuing. So the first, I don't want to say that all of the bills need to be rewritten because I don't know that yet, but I did want to make sure that everyone understood that there is still an opportunity to revise or add information to what has been submitted. So that is where we are right now.
So the next step is just to basically find out what the bills are.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Peter, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, all I wanted to say is that I think we need to be cognizant that the residents of Islesboro span a huge spectrum. There are people who are here just in the summer, as you know, and people who are here year round. I happen to be 78 and I'm retired and living here, and I care tremendously about the connection for medical emergencies, probably the highest priority. But I just want to say that I think it's important that we reach out to the whole community. And I have discussed this with Alex Thorne and with Ned Treslow, and I hope that we extend the employment. And I think if most people who are not here now understood the impact of this alleged hypothetical change, they might be extraordinarily concerned about their property values, about their ability to continue to live here. And I just hope that we can extend our reach to include everybody in this community.
That's a great thought, Peter. Thank you. Anyone else?
We did mention in the last meeting about not just using our year-round population numbers, but using our actual summer numbers, which is huge. The same would go for all the islands. That would certainly looks much different when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the economic impact of this change, if this became an undesirable place to be even part of the year, is just staggering, much larger than the size of the community in a demographic sense.
I think that concludes, I don't know if that encompassed the strategy discussion as well. I think.
Yeah, I guess just one other thing that I guess has been circulated, I believe, but we haven't mentioned tonight, so I just wanted to put it out there. And I don't know if Genevieve has seen a copy of it yet or not, but the union did, the Main State Ferry Service Union did do, you haven't seen that?
I have not seen it.
Okay, let me.
Yeah, that's what I brought last time. Yeah. I showed that to you.
Which is on the table there.
Okay. I'll make sure that we circulate that I see it. So I couldn't remember where I saw it, but I'll circulate it.
I know that I want to.
I don't think we shared that.
Hey, I see Lauren Bruce with a hand up. Hey, Lauren.
Yes, just very quickly while Genevieve is on. Yes, we were looking forward to finding out what is going to happen with these bills. I want to go back to something that Gabe pointed out, and that is the importance of us having a clear idea of how we're going to combine all of the elements that have been brought up tonight, and some that haven't even been brought up tonight, but we know that need to be included as a part of our strategy. And I'm wondering if that would be a part of what Genevieve would be doing. Can we get a little bit ahead of the game? I hear Fred's urgency and some of the other people's urgencies to lay out how we would be and somewhat the timing of including letter writing, including petitions, including lobbyists, including all the elements. I'm not saying that all of it would be done by Genevieve, but can we have that as a part of it to look at sort of the timing? What elements are we going to be including, and what's the timing of that to have a strategy overall over the next 4 months? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely want to be having the conversations about what the strategy is, and I think that that's probably a broader conversation than just us in this room and this island even. Because I think as noted earlier in this conversation, there are other islands that are very concerned about this exact issue. And speaking with one voice, with all the islands combined, I think is going to be a more effective strategy. And I think there's a lot of common ground and there's a lot of room for cooperation on this particular issue, and others with the ferry service. And so I think that working with them, I personally have talked with others from other islands this past week to have conversations about what that might look like. And I think we're still trying to develop a strategy, both locally about the most important things to us, and as well as in the region for other islands. And what's the most important thing to them, and how do we pull on this from the same direction?
Great, thank you.
And I'm happy to assist with that. Somebody brought up a point earlier about students, and Swans Island sends their high school students to MBI High School. So there's certainly a significant amount of overlap in the concerns about this issue.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and let me just say, I'm hoping that strategy, and I'm talking about, pen to paper, sort of outlining the timing, the various elements. We've sort of brought up quite a number of different strategies, but there should be some kind of paper document created in the next 2 months that sort of lays out what we're going to do with the legislature, what we're going to do with combining information from other islands. You get the drift. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's going to be put out by this group, and probably with a request for comment from the town as a whole too. But I think a position statement about where we stand and what our goals are is going to be sort of necessary to push in Augusta. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns? Hearing none, I think the next item on the agenda is just setting the next meeting date at this point, unless anybody has anything to add. Hearing none, thoughts on a next meeting date? The last time we set 2 weeks out, although it sounds as though we're going to be waiting for language from the bills, and that might be a month away. So perhaps it makes more sense to schedule a meeting in 1 month from now, although I'm open to other suggestions if folks want to have a meeting before.
Might be worth having a meeting a bit earlier than that, in case we get information more about these bills, to have time to.
Would it be worthwhile to have maybe a few workshops
That's a possibility.
Could have a workshop.
and sit down and just have a board discussion about what we're thinking about, and maybe start bringing
A
that.
brainstorm essentially.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
Sure, so maybe I'll suggest we have a brainstorm in 2 weeks and another meeting in a month.
Yeah, sounds good.
Would I
With
think
Genevieve,
be good.
we'll coordinate with her direct after this to figure out what makes the most sense there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead, Fred.
I just wanted to thank Miss McDonald for coming on, because she was able to clarify a lot of information, and it's nice to have somebody that knows the process to help us through it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for
Yeah,
being
thank
here.
you
We all
very much.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
So with that, so let's say 2 weeks from today, is everybody a Wednesday, the same thing? We'll say 2 weeks, whatever that day is, maybe.
That's February 5th.
February 5th. So we'll say workshop February 5th.
Does that work?
Yes, and then 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks for the meeting? 2 more weeks?
2 more weeks.
2 more weeks I have.
February 5th.
February 19th for a meeting.
February 19th for a meeting. Any objection? Hearing none. Those are the dates set for the next both workshop and meeting. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, what are the times for the workshop and the meeting?
I was gonna, so we didn't say that, but I think 4:30, if that's acceptable to everybody, since that's what it's been for these. 4:30 it is.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Moved and seconded.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate everybody showing up.
Thank you.
One thing. You know, we should probably be in touch with,